Hello, everyone, and welcome to Up to Bat. I'm your host, Rayna Maggelet, and today I'm joined alongside virtually with elite pitching specialist and author of Pitcher Consciousness 5.0, Tim Ballgame Nolan. Hi, Tim. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How are you?
Hi, Rayna. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. You are actually my first non-current athlete to come on Up to Bat. So I'm looking forward to this episode and switching it up a little bit. For those who might not know too much about you, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself before we get started with this interview?
Sure. So I'm from Orange County, California, born and raised. I went to Sonora High School. I played for Rich Lotting. Rich Lotting pitched in the Detroit Tiger system, and um, he used to tell me all the time, like, Timmy, you got to be an absolute cocky prick. That's the secret to success, and it's something that I really take with me into my coaching as well. I played junior college baseball at Fullerton College for Nick Fuscardo, and Paul Abbott was actually my pitching coach. For those of you who don't know who Paul Abbott is, he pitched for the Seattle Mariners in the 90s when they had Randy Johnson and Ken Griffey Jr. I learned a ton from Paul. Um, if you read Pitcher Consciousness 5.0, you'll see a lot of Paul's influences, definitely. I transferred to Biola University. We were in the GSAC conference at the time. I pitched against guys like Kirk Neuenhuis. Stephen Vogt actually was at APU the year before. I was at Biola. So it was a really stacked conference. Um, I was nationally ranked for saves my junior season. During summer ball after my junior season, I ended up tearing my labrum. Um, Full disclosure, I lifted stupid that summer. Like scouts and coaches like told me like, hey, you really need to put on some weight. So I lifted stupid. I didn't make the best decisions. I should have focused more on range of motion, focusing more on the lower half and doing high reps with the upper half. So now when I coach, I always make sure to tell pitchers like, hey, make sure you're smart, focus on range of motion. I'm actually an affiliate for armcare.com, and they have a really cool device that takes pitchers' metrics of your strengths and deficiencies in your arm strength so you can reduce the likelihood of getting injured and boost your velocity.
Mhm.
Um, I was talked to by a number of scouts. They were interested in me, but I ended up getting injured, and I went from throwing in the low 90s to barely touching 85 after I got surgery. So I got into coaching by doing lessons. I actually worked a couple of baseball camps when I was at Biola, and a bunch of parents came up to me after. They're like, "Hey, my kid does really well with you. Like, do you do lessons? Like, how much do you charge?" And I looked at the camp director, and he just kind of smiled. He said, "Charge whatever you want." I'm like,
There you go.
okay, sweet. So I got started by doing lessons, and then I got into coaching high school ball. I'd say probably one of my best success stories is coaching at Nogales High School. It's actually Tom House's alma mater.
Yeah.
Um, they finished dead last in league the year before I got there. We ended up winning league, and the team they set the school record for the lowest team ERA. Um, I'd say my toughest coaching job though has
Mhm.
been coaching D3 ball at Whittier College. Um, I really enjoyed my experience working for Mike Rizzo. Mike Rizzo's a class act, great coach. Um, Most of the pitchers on the team, their fastballs were in the mid 70s to upper 70s.
Mhm.
Their command wasn't always the best, but we did have a few pitchers on the team with some solid potential. Max Berber ended up getting SIAC pitcher of the week through a complete game shutout. So no, but that was actually my toughest job to do. I had to really focus extra and do a lot of mechanical work and
Yeah.
a lot of stuff on the mental side. So we ended up the year before I got there, they won 4 games the entire season. Their team ERA was an 11, and then when I got there, the team ERA was 8, which you say 8, that's not very good. Well, it dropped 3 full points.
Mm.
I mean, it's not great, but it's a significant difference. And we tripled our win rate. We ended up winning 13 games instead of 4. So I'm actually pretty proud of it, even though it doesn't look that great on paper. I've coached a lot of D1 players, especially mostly in summer ball. Been to the Northwoods League, Hamptons League. Hamptons League was by far the best coaching experience. The general manager was this British guy named Frank Emmett. Really cool guy. Long hair. He looks like he could have been in Led Zeppelin. The first book that I ever wrote was back in 2014. I was in grad school at the time, and it was the first kind of draft of the 5 mental tools. The main inspiration for the 5 mental tools was Derek Johnson. He's the pitching coach, big league pitching coach for the Cincinnati Reds. Okay. And yeah, he was at Vanderbilt at the time when he wrote his book's called The Complete Guide to Pitching. And in the book, he talks about presence, pace, pitchability, but in a different section, he talks about pitching with intent. So I kind of like, after reading that, like a bunch of light bulbs went off in my head, and I kind of came up with my own thing, especially with regards to Cattell's model with the 5-factor model, the stability, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So that's kind of how I came up with it. But I guess we can go more over it later.
So when did you know, I'm curious to ask this, that you wanted to dedicate your life to preparing as many pitchers as possible to thrive at the next level?
So when I got injured, I was pretty bummed for a while. I kind of got into coaching reluctantly at first. Like I was kind of reluctant about it. Yeah. Because I'd been playing for so long and I felt like I had the potential to pitch at the next level, and a lot of scouts agreed. But and then I found that the impact that I was making on a lot of people, teaching them what I had learned from guys like Paul Abbott, John Verhoeven, Nick Fuscardo, Rich Lotting, like all the guys that had coached me. It's really cool to give back to the game. And at this point, like I've seen so many success stories using like my material. For instance, I'm not going to say who she is, but like in the very beginning, like when I was in grad school, the first book that I wrote, I didn't publish it. I didn't know anything about the whole Kindle Direct publishing thing at the time. Very elite, probably one of the best pitchers in the history of softball. And the notion, or a lot of people would say like, hey, she really struggles with the mental side, but she's got elite stuff. And so her and I talked. This was 2015. Okay. And so I taught her my stuff, and I used to we talked pitching almost every day. And she ended up having the lowest ERA and the lowest WHIP of her entire career. And then right after that, she accomplished a landmark accomplishment. So, and then let's see, 2015 also, I had a friend who she coached at San Jose State softball. And she's like, hey, my pitcher, our ace is really struggling. Like, she just has meltdowns on the mound. Can you talk to her? And I was like, what do you want me to tell her? She goes, tell her what you tell your baseball guys. And I'm like, that's not a good idea.
You're like, can't do that. Can't do that.
She goes, tone it down a little bit, but do what you need to do.
Good.
So like I talked to her a couple of times, and she ended up, the top team in the conference at the time was Fresno State. Okay. She ends up shutting out Fresno State, winning for 7 innings, and then the next day he throws 6 shutout innings against them. And the
Wow.
head coach was like, the head coach was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so she ended up winning first team All Mount Conference. I was super proud of her.
So you have a book titled Pitcher Consciousness 5.0. Outstanding book. I've read it. It's opened my eyes a lot, and I've never even thrown a curveball in my life. So I have to ask, is there kind of a motive you had when you decided, like, I'm going to write this book? When was kind of that light bulb moment you had that you wanted to take it from in-person pitching and mentoring to writing a book? What was kind of that switch? What was the process of that?
So especially like going back to my injury,
Mm-hmm.
I want as many pitchers as possible to realize their dreams of pitching at the highest level, or pitching at the next level, pitching at the highest level.
Yeah.
Like my best outings, like I was strong in all 5 mental tools in my best outings, and the outings that weren't so good, like I look back and I go, okay, I was deficient in this one and this one. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like I want I want coaches and scouts to have an easier job evaluating and developing pitchers,
Mm-hmm.
and I want pitchers to accomplish what I wasn't able to. So it's so basically I just want to give back to the game. I just want to pass on everything that I learned from Paul Abbott. Was one of my main influences, and yeah, that's the main motivation for it for sure.
You've talked about the 5 mental tools model a few times. So talk to me more about how you developed that as well as PC5 scouting system.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So Derek Johnson, in his book, The Complete Guide to Pitching, he
Mhm.
has a short chapter on the mental side. It's he talks about pace, presence, and pitchability.
Mhm.
So that only focuses on 2 aspects of the 5 mental tools. So like pace is part of presence. Um, Presence is your ability to focus one pitch at a time. Derek Johnson literally says presence of mind, and also carrying yourself with presence, having good body language.
Mhm.
Pitchability is having quality feel for what pitch to throw and when.
Mhm.
Um, so let's see. And then from my studies in psychology, we went over Raymond Cattell's 5 factor continuum. So basically, I chose stability, aggressiveness, let's see what else, openness, conscientiousness, and insurgency. Not necessarily extroversion.
Mhm.
You don't have to be extroverted to have really good surgency. Like Snoop Dogg, for example. Snoop's an introvert, but his
Mhm.
surgency is through the roof. Like he knows he's awesome.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
I talk about surgency as opposed to extroversion. So and then so it's kind of like looking at Derek Johnson, what he was talking about.
Mhm.
And then I was like, what's a 5 letter acronym I can use? And I was like, oh, pitch. Perfect. PITCH.
Mhm.
So um so presence, I already kind of talked about it. It's the one pitch at a time mindset.
Mhm.
Presence of mind, awareness, what else? Pace, tempo. Like I've been watching a lot of Dodger games lately, and I've been doing like my charts, and a lot of pitchers have a really fast pace, and it really affects their command. So the second mental tool is intent. Um, Intent basically it has cognitive. It's it's mainly it's cognitive, but it has more to do with how you throw each pitch. And Derek Johnson also talks about the me versus going from me versus me, which is where you're fighting yourself, you're doubting yourself, to the me versus you. Like
Yeah.
the the hitter wants to take something from you,
Mhm.
and you got to make it personal. I mean, I say some stuff in Pitcher Consciousness 5.0. I'm not going to
Mhm.
repeat on camera, but
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That was going through my mind when you were speaking. I was just thinking of that line that I read numerous times in that book, and I was just cracking up every time it came out.
Let's see. Another one of my favorite authors, Tim Grover, author of Relentless.
Mhm.
Fantastic book. He was, for the viewers that don't know who Tim Grover is, he was Michael Jordan's personal trainer from 1989 all the way until he retired in 2003. 6 NBA rings, best basketball player in the history of the game.
Mhm.
Um, Tim Grover in his book Relentless, he talks about how to how to have an elite mindset. And one of the main things that Tim Grover talks about is going to the dark side or being in touch with your dark side. And that's a key aspect for pitching with intent and having the me versus you
Yeah.
mindset. Um, in Tim's most recent book called Winning, um, he has trying to remember. Oh yeah. So he has this exercise that you do where you write down like different things that kind of get under your skin and you
Mhm.
want to like put your hand over it. And like the one that makes you like white hot, like really like fired up, that's your dark side.
So in the book, I'm not sure if you've read it, but it's called The Mind and the Brain by Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz. He talks about self-directed neuroplasticity, which is changing the structure of our neural pathways with conscious intention. So for you, what role does self-directed neuroplasticity play when it comes to pitching?
I love that book. That's a fantastic book.
Yeah.
The chapter in that book on I think it's called The Quantum Brain.
Mhm.
That's my favorite chapter. And he also talks about Henry Stapp, um, Mind Matter and Quantum Mechanics, and Mindful Universe, both fantastic books.
Mhm.
Um, so the five mental tools, and I have a bunch of cognitive exercises in the book. So
Mhm.
it's all about using your mind to rewire your brain to be a five mental tool pitcher. And one of the things also is the book is meant to be an ultimate guide for a performance journal. Like I know the pitching coach at the University of Florida,
Mhm.
David Kopp, really good guy.
Yeah.
And he told me a couple years ago, he told me um, that he every time his guys throw off a mound, whether it's a bullpen or in the game, they always have to write in their performance journal. And so that's something that I really took away from him.
Mhm.
And all the exercises and the different questions in the book um, are meant to be a guide for the performance journal. That'll, if you're a pitcher watching this, that'll really help you take your mental game to the next level.
I know a lot of pitchers sometimes, especially if they have a bad outing or a bad time on the mound, they kind of forget about that game, don't really just kind of throw it down the trash, which is sometimes good to do. But they don't really reflect on it. So I think that's a really interesting way to kind of go about it is like reflect on it and work towards those mistakes or what you might have done wrong there.
That
So,
after the good outings is really when you want to take the most notes because then
mhm.
you can go back and look at them and
Yeah.
then you give yourself awareness. But you definitely want to do it after a bad outing too, because then you have that self awareness where you're on the mound. Not that you want to focus in terms of okay, what's going wrong. That's the last thing you want to think about.
Mhm.
But um, and the main purpose of my book is having that self awareness where there's the five opposite symptoms of the five mental tools
Yeah.
that you want to be like, okay, my presence is a little shaky right now, or I'm not throwing with intent, or I'm overthrowing,
Mhm.
etc.
So, being a coach yourself for many, many years of experience, what are the secrets to getting results from a coaching standpoint?
The most important thing I would say is having high expectations.
Mhm.
Um, not necessarily so much in what you say, but in like the way you carry yourself, the way you communicate, the feedback that you give.
Mhm.
Um, high expectations are important. I had the opportunity to meet Robert Rosenthal several times before he recently passed away.
Yeah.
Really nice guy. So he did a bunch of research in the 60s on subconscious expectations and their influence on performance. And basically the main book that him and I talked about was the one he did on a school study. It's the book's called Pygmalion in the Classroom. And there's 4 things that high expectation leaders do. It's climate, input, output, and feedback. So if you have high expectations, you usually have like more of a kind of a warm demeanor.
Mhm.
If you're a military leader, your warmth may not be as much, but you can still have high expectations. It's really just how you carry yourself and the way you interact. Input, they allow for more questions, and they're more patient with certain questions, and like the way that when the students talk about
Mhm.
different stuff, like they try to figure out their train of thought, as opposed to low expectations. They were more kind of dismissive. um let's see, output, uh they gave more work, more challenging work, and they expected them to deliver. So when I was at Biola, I was the high leverage guy. I had to pitch. I had like in 45 games, I had 28 appearances. Um, and he would put me in. John Verhoeven would put me in the game with like bases loaded, 1 out, 2, 3, 4 hitters coming up, and he would just hand me the ball, and he would just walk away, like he wouldn't say anything. And some of the players were like, "How come he doesn't say anything to you?" I'm like, "What is he gonna say to me?"
Mhm.
Like you got to have that cockiness, like you got to have that arrogance about you. You have to believe that you're the best person in that situation.
Mhm. You do talk about that a few times in your book as well. You have to think of yourself as the best of the best. For my boyfriend, who's a pitcher that read this book, he found that really helpful and he got a good laugh out of that. But I think he took something more helpful with it for sure. Last question to wrap up this interview, ending it off strong. Why do you believe that pitchers should read Pitcher Consciousness 5.0?
It's the most comprehensive book on the mental side of pitching available. My personal favorite book on the mental side of pitching is The Mental ABCs of
Mhm.
Pitching by Harvey Dorfman.
Great
That
book.
book, I love that book.
Yeah.
But my book is so the 5 mental tools, like you can read it. It's a template. Once you learn the 5 mental tools, you can read any book you want, and
Mhm.
you'll be able to categorize them into all 5 areas. The cognitive exercises will literally help you rewire your brain to be more of a cocky prick. It's I'm super proud of it.
Yeah. As you should. Well, Tim, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on. I learned so much, and I hope the pitchers watching this did too.
Awesome.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah, of course. I'm so glad you got to come on. We've been talking about this for a while, so I'm glad we finally got to do it.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode with Tim Ballgame Nolan. This is Up to Bat with Rayna Maggelet. Bye.